Oh, here we go. Teams and I are still learning from each other. Okay. So this is our workshop for advisors on student organization, advisement, and all things policy-wise this year. So we're just excited to welcome you to the space, and this is really informal. It's a great way to get your questions answered about advising student orgs this year. I am going to introduce myself, and I'll have my co-presenter introduce herself as well. My name is Ray Flannery. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the new Assistant Director for Student Organizations. And I started at Xavier this July.
I'm Jill Finch. I'm the coordinator in student involvement.
So today we're just going to kind of take you through some quick high-level policy, and then we will touch on some of the different questions that you might have. All right, can you hear me now? Okay, I don't know why it muted me there. I was just saying that since you last saw us, student involvement has actually grown quite a bit. I'm one of the new faces on the team, but we have a lot of new enthusiasm, and we're sprinkled all throughout the Gallagher Student Center. Our team is really happy to support student orgs with anything they might need throughout the year. The primary point people for the student org side of things in-house are really Dustin, Jill, and myself. Dustin might pop in and say hello on the meeting, but he is still in our office and sharing the load with Jill and myself to kind of support all of our student leaders this year. And then while our team has grown a bit since you might have last seen, our mission still remains the same, which is we believe that through involvement, individuals discover their passions and develop their strengths to lead a purposeful life. And this is kind of baked into everything we do, from A to Z, beginning to end of a project, the year. We give students opportunities to explore, but also really push them to be the drivers of their own success and leadership. And this is kind of a great place for them to test their waters on leading a student org. And so, like I mentioned, you might already know or be familiar with some of the things that we do on campus, but just to give a quick snapshot, we manage the Manresa orientation program and transfer orientations, campus-wide activities like our fall concert, boat dance, things like that. Clubs and orgs, that's the focus of today's session. Gallagher Student Center is a space that we upkeep. Leadership programs are managed by our office. Commuter services in Gallagher up on the third floor is overseen by our team. We have some affiliation with off-campus living, event policy, which is something you'll hear a bit more about in today's slides. And student government is an extension of our office team as well. Their office space just got renovated, actually, and they're adjacent to our suite now. So we are happy to support them still this year. When we met students to give them this content for the workshops during Week of Welcome, we really wanted to set the stage for a successful year. And we wanted to encourage them to take a strong presence on campus, become, active members of their groups, active forces for the campus so that people would actually know, that each group was thriving and robust. So when we task students with sort of this charge to be active groups, we wanted them to think about ways to not just have events with food, but really be intentional about their programming and inviting members to join, having recurring meetings, things like that. We also pushed for responsiveness to our emails. We know that we send a lot of content their way, but just keeping them in the loop about anything our office needs to know is really essential for their success, especially with policy changes that have happened this year, and just as we continue to adjust as things are needed, wanting to make sure everyone stays up to speed. Similarly, we want our student leaders to be really engaged with their general membership so that the leaders and maybe club presidents aren't just solely dictating the agenda for a club throughout the year. And finally, we wanted to instill a sense of future-mindedness just because some students shared with us that they might have felt a little underprepared for their transition into their office role. And we wanted to make sure that they're thinking, okay, how can they set up the next person for more success? So things like cataloging meeting agendas on EngageXU, making sure to keep detailed notes, meeting minutes, things like that, getting that all squared away is going to help them help their club and leave a legacy as well. When we gathered students together, we had a variety of different officers, kind of a smattering of different positions, depending on the structure of each group. But we wanted to highlight some responsibilities that we recommend for different officer roles. So we tell presidents that they are kind of the first line of defense when it comes to anything that their club is needing to respond for, or just even if we need a quick email point person for something to clarify, that person is kind of our most responsible, receptive person. But that doesn't mean that they make all the decisions either. They're just the ones speaking to the mission of each group. And then the vice president is where things might get a little bit less clear cut for certain groups, but we say that person might be best suited to take on the recruitment piece and really work to grow the club or group membership and things like that. And then we say treasurers are obviously the person moving the money around, but again, not the sole discretionary person when it comes to how the money should be spent. They're just the ones savvy enough to keep tabs on where the money is going, things like that, making sure that the budget is sufficient for events that a club wants to have. Some clubs have multiple officers in each position, or they'll sort of transition in their new leadership at some point throughout the year. That's fine. We welcome that too. Just making sure that no one's kind of dropping the ball on their respective responsibilities. And then on the flip side of this is the advisor piece. So we also shared with students how you all come into the picture as advisors. We told them we ask you to be engaged, be responsible, be sort of their guardrails, but also making sure that the students are the ones in the driver's seat, calling the shots. As advisors, you walk a fine line between not micromanaging, but not just backseat driving and clicking through their approvals on EngageXU either. It's really this happy medium where you are sort of building this relationship with the students and getting a chance to just retain some institutional knowledge that will outlive the student leaders even past when they're no longer on the board or when they graduate Xavier. Part of this also has to do with setting expectations and boundaries, accountability, things like that, conversations that are sometimes tricky, but we know they can really help a group thrive. And when it comes to things like, if a group wants to travel or anything like that, we wanted leaders to know that responsibility doesn't always fall squarely on the shoulders of each advisor. We know that you're giving up a lot of your time to be part of these groups, and we know that sometimes you can't travel with a group or you have other plans. That's completely fine. Other faculty and staff are welcome to chaperone trips on your behalf. We'd like to say too, advisors are sort of the first line of contact, just because of that institutional knowledge you might have built up, or you might know the student leaders better or their dynamic better than we do, and then student involvement can be sort of that backup side of things. But again, we just want to make sure that we're all working together to support the student initiatives. And the nice thing is that the EngageXU platform makes it really easy to see sort of where those checks and balances are built in and taking place. And now Jill's gonna talk a little bit through some of the finances.
All right, so this screen is just showing what we're going to cover with finances, and specifically we are going to go over some of the new spending rules for this year. So as advisors, it's good for you to know that the student activity fee is $150 per semester for full-time students and $12 per credit for part-time students. This student activity fee is what funds all of our clubs and organizations and is allocated each year by our Student Government Association. And then every one of your organization has a unique fund number. It begins with 81. You as advisors, along with any of your officers, can see this if you go to your group settings and more. The fund number is there. We have told students too, when they walk into our office, there is a blue table with a cheat sheet with their fund number, and we are also happy to email that to them. We do recommend that they keep this in their phone, take a picture, something, because they do need this number for any type of financial form that they are submitting. And then all the groups have an accounting book feature. This is also under the group page, and it's just under accounting book. This shows what the current balance is. for the club. And it also has a nice archive feature where they can go back and look at previous years. I do tell students, just because they aren't familiar with University P cards and Xavier Buy, that if they do purchase any items through either of those two means, that it does take a little bit longer to actually hit the accounting book. And I do recommend that the treasurer keeps track of money separately in an Excel spreadsheet or some type of way to keep track of the funds. So they just have a more up-to-date way to know what they have. And then now we're going to cover some of the updated spending and purchasing rules for this year. So student organizations have to submit all purchasing requests at least 2 weeks in advance. The university's finance department is reviewing all purchases over $500 once a week. So this is anything entered into Xavier Buy. So this could be anything if like Amazon, if it's over $500, or if they would buy any type of apparel over $500. So it just takes a little bit longer for that process. There are no reimbursements for purchases made from individual personal Amazon accounts. We have a business Prime account through Xavier, and we are telling students that is what they need to use. And then for gift cards for event prizes, individual gift cards have to be $50 or less, and the total amount for a program is $500 or less. So for thank you gifts, students cannot purchase advisor thank you gifts or gifts for other university employees with their student organization funds. If they want to get their advisor a thank you gift, they absolutely can. They just have to pay for it with their own money. Student thank you gifts are allowed, so this would be gifts for graduating seniors or officers. It just can't exceed a total of $25 per person. And student organizations cannot purchase regalia such as honor cords or stoles for graduating seniors with their student org funds. If they wish to do this, they would just have to pay themselves, and they can purchase through Follett. And then with apparel, if any club is looking to buy any type of apparel, it's a maximum of $35 per individual student. If for some reason their apparel totals to $40 per person, then each member of the club that wishes to participate with the apparel has to chip in $5 of their own personal money. And purchases have to be made through one of 3 companies, which we will touch base on later in the presentation. And then with equipment, we are asking that no equipment can be purchased or reimbursed, and this includes items like speaker systems, software, digital cameras, lighting systems, sporting equipment, or outdoor furnishings. Unfortunately, in the past few years, we have had seniors in the club go and buy, say, a speaker system, and they walk off with it after they graduate. Then the club needs it again the next year and the next year after that, and we're just really trying to avoid that this year. And then with deliveries and pickup, so if your club orders anything from Amazon, Brown Enterprise Solutions, or any type of apparel, that gets sent to our office, and I always email the person that submits the purchase form to let them know, hey, your items have arrived, please stop by and pick them up. This year, we're just asking if they could pick all items up within 48 hours of receiving the email from me. As Ray said, things have shifted around in our office space. We don't have the student org resource room anymore, so everything just sits out in our office. And then one of the bigger changes this year, P-card requests have to be made 2 weeks in advance. Students can request to use the P-card, they just request it through the purchase form. I'm the only one in our office with a P-card at this point, so we ask that it's not taken out of the office. They can go ahead and set up a time with me, come in, they can buy catering, whatever, they can pay for dues. It just has to be done in our office. And this website at the bottom of this slide is very helpful and has all of this spelled out and broken down.
Jill, if we've got a card, can we use it and just assign the fund, or do you want us to use your card?
Nope, you can absolutely use yours and assign the fund. Yeah, that's not a problem at all.
Great.
Yeah. So now I'm going to cover the 4 different finance forms that we have. The student payment advance form has not really changed too much from last year. So this is if students want to request a Focus Blue card through the Bursar's office. The Focus Blue card is similar to a Visa gift card. It can be used at point of sale locations. So they can use it at Kroger, Target, Walmart, any type of store like that. They cannot use it to pay performers or individuals for service. And then organizations can only take out one advance at a time, and it's up to $300 in total. I've been using this example. If Ray's the president of the club and I'm the vice president, Ray takes out the Focus Blue card for $300, gives it to me. I'm supposed to go take care of all of the purchasing. I lose the card along with all of the receipts. It will be Ray's Bursar bill that's charged for that. It's always the responsibility of the person who is listed on the advance. And then we just ask that students return the receipts along with the Focus Blue card to the Bursar's office within 7 days. And we have told students over and over again, please, please, please take pictures of the receipts. They will accept photos. We also accept that for any Zelle reimbursements too. And then with the pre-spend authorization form, this is for individuals who wish to spend more than $300 of their own personal money and be reimbursed. We have this form in place because we've seen it so many times that students will submit this for something as simple as catering, and we can intervene and say, actually, we can put that on the P card, or if it's a caterer that's set up in Xavier By, we can submit it that way. So it's more of a way for us to intervene and be like, yeah, let's not put like $350 on mom and dad's credit card. With this form, though, if a club does not fill this out, and they do spend more than $300 of their own money and submit something in the Zelle reimbursement form, they will not be reimbursed. Unfortunately, we have had to deny a couple of students this year for doing this exact thing for an event that was never approved, going off campus to have said event. So we're just trying to avoid situations like that this year. And then we have the student and advisor reimbursement forms. So students and advisors can be reimbursed by Zelle for eligible purchases made up to $300. And like I said earlier, Amazon's not eligible. Over $300 can be reimbursed by Zelle if the pre-spend authorization form was approved in advance. You just upload your copies of the receipts. Once again, can be photos, and missing receipts will not be reimbursed. The university's tax exempt. We do have a tax exempt form up on our website for students if they need it. One good thing to know is an advisor, if you do submit this form, your president and treasurer are the first line of approval on this. So just make sure you let them know, because they really get confused by what a workflow approval is. And then you all are the first line of approval on any of these purchasing forms except for the advisor one. And then with the purchase form, this has to be completed 2 weeks in advance. And this is used to order items from Amazon or office supplies from Brown Enterprise Solutions. This is used to request the P card, and it's used to pay vendors. If a student is looking to pay vendors, they have to have a quote or a contract. They can't sign any contracts, and neither can advisors. It has to come through our office for signature, and we'll cover that more later. And then we also don't use this form to hire students. So if your club is looking to hire a student to do graphic design, DJ, photography, they have to be set up through student employment, and Ray can assist with that. So with donating funds and scholarships, student activity fee dollars cannot be donated. So if clubs are fundraising to donate funds or scholarships, they just need to keep track of those specific fundraised dollars. Like I said earlier, it's just best that the treasurer does keep a separate type of spreadsheet. That way, when they are ready to donate, we know exactly which funds are being donated, and it's not part of the student activity fee. And a great fundraiser for all clubs that's a really easy lift is March Gladness, and our office will have more information on that in the early spring.
All right, so now I'm going to shift gears a little and talk about contracts. In general, students should not be signing contracts on behalf of their groups. This really comes into play when students want to maybe have an off-campus event at a venue that's not, local to campus proper. So they might have a performer or something like that, or they're booking a space. Maybe they're doing a retreat somewhere and they have to sign a contract. This is where us as OSI staff can kind of come in and sign that contract on their behalf. We just don't really want students to get into the weeds on any like legal specifics with contracts. We also know that risk management sometimes needs copies of certificates of insurance, for instance, if a performer or something is coming onto campus. And so, or like even a vendor or anything like that of any kind. catering organizations. Just it's best for students to kind of defer that to our team, since they're not authorized to sign on behalf of Xavier University. And then depending on the cost too, like if it's an expensive contract, depending on the budget of the club, that might be subject to more review from higher ups at the university. So we just want to make sure that that is really clearly communicated to the students and that they know that if this is something that they're kind of eyeballing, that they talk to us proactively just to make sure that we are looped in as much as possible. The rest of the presentation covers some kind of quick and various policies that are in place about different types of events. Some of these might or might not apply to different groups based on their plan for programming this year, but these are also always available on our website to read more about in depth. We're just going to kind of do a quick run through of some of our heavy hitter policies so you get a sense for how we're kind of guiding students on this. The first is submitting events in EngageXU. So every single event that groups program this year, even club meetings or board meetings, must be submitted at least 2 weeks before the event is set to take place. That gives our office staff and you all as advisors time to approve the event, give your stamp of approval saying, yep, I knew about this, or hey, did we consider X, Y, or Z about that date? And then that way we're consistently upholding this across the board for all the student groups. This is very consistent. 2 weeks is kind of that magic timeline this year that we're seeing all across the board. And then this is not a new expectation by any means, but tracking attendance is something that we're really driving home with students this year because it's so easy to do in EngageXU and very, very necessary for our team to collect good data about things like retention. So officers can track this through QR codes at events. They can also even do like paper pencil sign-ins. That's completely fine as long as that information gets fed into the event after the fact, maybe by like a secretary on the board to just make sure that that gets cataloged. And then the students also can have this data to reflect back on when completing things like their mid-year or end-of-year report for our office to say, yeah, we've had a steady growth in membership, or our events, you know, at the beginning of the semester were a little bit better attended than the end. And then they can kind of work based on that plan too. So if they have questions about this, they can always come and chat with us. We check people into events all the time, so we know kind of the tips and tricks. But for the most part, this seems pretty seamless. Students have found it relatively easy to use. To reserve space on campus, this takes shape in a variety of different ways depending on where students want to host their event. If they're looking to use anything outdoor on the Academic Mall, the Xavier Yard, or Justice Atrium, they can just indicate that on the event form and Jill will submit that signing off that those spaces are available. However, if they're looking to use any kind of space around campus, particularly indoors like classrooms, the classroom requests would need to go through the registrar's office. Spaces in Gallagher Student Center would need to be made either through speaking to the front desk staff in the building or going on Mazevo to see what's available. The hub and intramural fields are managed by Rec Sports, and the Cintas Center has their own team of staff that sell that space and book for students. There are even more places that students can host events. This is all listed on a nice handy PDF guide on our website with the most up-to-date contact emails for each point person in every building. It can be a little bit tricky, I think, for students to just get started and figure out where they even want to host an event, but the goal here is to guide them to somebody who might know the functionality of a space best and what the space can accommodate, what the rules are, if there's a cost, what the possible setups are, things like that. Just it's a little bit more involved than maybe students predict. So we want to make sure that they're starting in the right place. In terms of food trucks, student groups are welcome to bring food trucks to campus. They just have to register them in advance, again, 2 weeks ahead of time at minimum. And in reality, they should be booking the food truck well in advance because these businesses tend to fill up pretty quickly on availability. The reason that this has to go through some additional review on our side is because food trucks have to turn in their certificate of insurance to operate for the risk management office. They also have to prove that they're up to the county codes of health. So we also just want to make sure that students who are stepping up to the food truck know that the event should be free. So there's typically this expectation on campus that if we have a food truck here, Xavier students won't have to pay anything. It's not like a point of purchase type scenario where food trucks are just rolling up to campus and vending, but rather clubs are subsidizing that cost for programs or events. We'll mainly see this for like bigger events or if clubs partner with one another. Our office does a food truck every Friday, so we're kind of experts on this world of just getting all the ducks in a row. So if students do want to go this route, they just have to reach out to us in advance and we can kind of point them in the right direction to get them started. In terms of fundraising, this is something Jill already mentioned a little bit, but I'll go into a bit more detail here. Student orgs have to register every event that they do that's a fundraiser by clicking a box when they submit their event form, telling us that it's a fundraiser, what the dates are, what type of fundraiser, things like that. This includes things like sale of any kind to members of maybe merchandise or just collecting dues. This could also be if they are doing like a Corito fundraiser or maybe working a basketball game for the concessions to make a little extra money. Even in-kind donations like Toys for Tots or Coats for Kids, that's going to be subject to a fundraiser approval too. And the reason for this is because we want to be in touch with wherever the fundraiser is taking place, the building managers, so that they know this is happening and students can kind of really clearly earmark where the funds are going, how much they receive, things like that. Students are also prohibited from selling any homemade baked goods on campus. That's just to avoid any kind of allergens and, again, county health standards, things like that. If students are interested in doing a storefront of any kind or collecting dues, they can always reach out to our office and we can get them set up and point them in the right direction. Student invited speakers are when a student group wants to bring somebody who's external to Xavier, either onto campus to speak to the club or at an event, or it could even be virtually if it's like a Teams call or something like that with somebody who has a lot of influence. This is just anyone who basically does not already have ties with Xavier. They're not working here. Alumni, if they came back to talk, they would have to be submitted as a student invited speaker event. Again, we're looking for a 2-week approval here minimum to ensure that Xavier has the proper time to plan in case a speaker might be deemed controversial or draw a large crowd. Those are considerations that we want to make sure we have ample time to really consider. But something else too I'll mention here, since we have advisors in the space, if you are a tenured faculty member and you have academic freedom in your classroom, that doesn't necessarily extend to your role as a club advisor the same way that it would in class. So even if a colleague from UC is going to be teaching or speaking to your club students, that doesn't have the same protection that would still be subject to this review policy. And we won't just reject events if they're deemed controversial. We just want to make sure that they are known ahead of time and campus can respond if necessary to the content. But Xavier does reserve the right to also reject an event if it deems necessary. This kind of goes along the same lines as what I was just saying, but political activities are something that we're hearing a lot about this year. We just want to make sure that since the university is a nonprofit, we want to shore up that based on the IRS designation that we receive, Xavier is really not being seen as political or partisan in any way. And so we've had some groups hosting voter registration drives, and those events have to remain nonpartisan in nature. So this is not just for our politically affiliated groups in nature, but we've had groups that are typically less politically active that wanted to get more involved, which is great. But those events have to be separate from any kind of campaigning or canvassing that's happening on campus. And again, these are submitted 2 weeks in advance just to make sure we know about them and that they have the appropriate space reserved as well. Student alcohol events are pretty uncommon, but they can happen according to our policy. These are for when the majority of attendees are over 21 and the club wants to have alcohol at the function. They just indicate that on the form, but then they have to meet with our senior director, Leah, just to ensure that they've made proper consideration for things like transportation, security, licensing. The liquor license on campus is held by Chartwell's, our caterer. So if they're having the event on campus, Chartwell's would have to be vending the alcohol products. This isn't something, like I said, that we see very often, but it can happen. So just wanted to be clear about when and how that kind of comes to be for the students. Motion picture copyright, this comes into play if students want to do any kind of like a movie night event. Copyright law unfortunately prohibits our student clubs from just popping open a laptop and streaming a movie. They actually have to reserve the rights to do so and purchase the rights from one of the companies that we work with to do that. The only real ways to bypass this are through Netflix original documentaries or university titles they can find on Kanopy, which is the library's streaming platform. Otherwise, even like educational exemptions you might have as an instructor for a course don't pertain to clubs the same way. This could cost a couple $100s, so we really want to caution student groups that if they're picking a movie based on, you know, popularity, recency, things like that, they are budgeting properly for that event to take place, because they can't promote or have the event if they don't have the rights to a film title. Similarly, we want to make sure that we're preserving the Xavier brand as well. So brand use, promotional material, and apparel are all subject to a lot of review. Marketing and communications reviews all, you know, proofs before they go to print for apparel and merchandising. And then student orgs have pretty limited use of different logos from Xavier. They can use the plain Xavier logo here on the screen, or they can get one created with their club name from the marketing department. But D'Artagnan, the Blue Blob, or the Sword are limited to only athletic use. Those designs, including those, will not be approved unless they're for an athletic team or function. And then the university has 3 separate vendors that license different designs. They're SmartCat, Consolidates, and we have one more. They are no longer taking applications for new vendors at this time. So students can't just jump on like customink.com and whip up a TV or a t-shirt design and you know, get that reimbursed. That's not going to be acceptable. Student domestic travel is when students want to take their group off campus and it's greater than 35 miles away, or an overnight stay anywhere but campus. This is the only exception to the 2-week timeline. We asked for 3 weeks lead time here because we really want to make sure that all of the proper protocols have been met, risk management has been notified. There's also a roster that needs to be collected of all of the traveling members. That doesn't have to be submitted finally until within 48 hours of the trip, but we really want to make sure that that's well documented just for the safety of our students. So again, coordinating with the folks over in Flynn Hall from our risk management side just to make sure that everything looks up to snuff. And then if students need to purchase any kind of travel or accommodations, we're happy to sit down with them and make those bookings in our office. They just need to set up a time to do that by emailing one of us. And our student travel website is linked at the bottom of this slide. That's a great place to see some extra information about student travel, maybe helping students figure out whether they need a chaperone, what the protocols are, things like that. The flip side of this is off-campus activities, which are more local to the Xavier area. These are within the 35-mile radius from campus, and they are not overnight stays. We've had groups going in the past to see a Reds game. We've had groups going to see a Bengals game. We've had groups going on a ski trip. Some of those activities might or might not be high enough risk to warrant a chaperone or not, and that's where students would need to be in talks with risk management. But in general, these activities need to be submitted 2 weeks in advance, unless there's a higher risk, in which case we recommend even sooner, just for the sake of full approval. And again, these are great opportunities for students to use their club budgets to be social with one another, right? It's not just business, it's also socializing, building community, and things like that. We just want to remind everybody about Xavier's anti-hazing policy. This is not new, but it is still in effect, and it's been in effect for a while. Xavier takes hazing very seriously, and unfortunately it does happen on all college campuses. As staff, you're required to report any kind of hazing allegations you might hear to Xavier Police. And students are required to complete this training as well when they join our community at Xavier. So this is something everyone should be well versed in, but just to kind of brush up on it, we like to indicate some of the things that hazing can look like. Because it's not always just what the media portray, right? It's not always physical, but it is typically extreme. It can be illegal. activities can fall under this. But in short, if it's something that students have to ask why they have to do a certain activity or be part of something to join the group or contain good status in the group, that could be considered hazing. And this is also just a good reminder that as an advisor, if you're kind of out of the loop on something the club is planning and you're not really sure why, it might be good to just nudge and make sure that you're up to speed on everything in terms of what the club is doing, and that way nothing is kind of falling under the radar here. The end of campus programming is the cutoff date that we use every semester to ensure that programs have wrapped up and students can focus on exams. So this fall, that is Friday, December 6th at midnight. That's the last Friday before final exams begin. And then in the spring, that will be Friday, May 2nd. Again, we just really want to make sure that that's clear so students aren't waiting until the last minute to submit events, spend money, things like that. That should be happening throughout the time that they're here this semester. And our gambling policy is pretty clear cut. In short, students should not gamble for money. It's not going to be approved as an event. Baseline is our program that we use to track club expectations. So this is most applicable to student clubs. This doesn't apply for subordinate bodies, working groups, or university affiliated organizations, but most groups fall under baseline if they are just a club. And so baseline is really meant to ensure that we have some check marks and benchmarks in place throughout the year to make sure clubs have an active presence. So the first of these requirements is that clubs have to meet at least once a month for their general membership. This is roughly 3 times in the fall, September, October, November, and 4 times in the spring, January, February, March, April. If it's a little bit off that timeline, that's not a huge deal. We just want to see consistency here. These also have to have an accompanying meeting agenda that gets submitted on EngageXU, and students have received the form to submit those as well. Advisors are also expected to meet with their club officers at least once a month, about 7 times an academic year. This can also take the form of you attending a general meeting, that can count, just to make sure you have some contact and some touch points with the group. There's a few other requirements to baseline as well. We've asked for students to submit a membership recruitment and retention plan to let us know how they plan to grow the organization. Programs and events. Clubs are expected to hold 3 events throughout the fall and spring, 3 each semester, to extend beyond just their club meetings. This can be open to the full campus, and it can be baked into a larger event too, like Week of Welcome, Winter Week of Welcome, things like that. We also anticipate that each group should do a service engagement at some point throughout the year with at least 80% of their roster. And we want students to be clear that they are to spend the money that they've received if they're a funded group down at least by 85%. And that's to ensure that they can really justify asking for the same or more money when it comes to making those pitches again in the spring to student government. So that's kind of baseline in a nutshell. It's got a lot of components, but the students are relatively well versed in this because we've been doing this for several years now. So that's all the content we had, but I'm sure there are questions, so we want to open up the room and see if there's anything we can help demystify. All right, I'm not hearing any questions, which is surprising, but I'll take it. Hopefully that means we covered everything we were supposed to. If you need to reach out to us at any point, you can shoot us an email and we'll be happy to get back in touch with you and kind of guide you along. And we want to thank you too for your investment in these student groups. We know that their success would not be possible without your help as their advisors.
Thank you.
Thanks to both of you.
Thanks. Bye.